Good morning everyone. My name is Ritesh and today we'll discuss current affairs topic, and today's topic is drone monitoring, right? So first let us start with what we will discuss in this topic itself, right? So first we will discuss why this particular thing was in news, this drone monitoring, why this was in news. We'll discuss that. Then we'll discuss the key points related to the drone monitoring and the subject it relates to. Like Bihar recently said that they'll monitor through drone how much to actually prohibit the usage of alcohol. They'll monitor through this drone they'll use drone to monitor these kind of things, right? So they will discuss we'll discuss that too. Key points related to drone monitoring, how they will use it, in which sector they will use it, we'll discuss that. Then the Prohibition Acts, we'll discuss some of the Prohibition Acts related to that, right? We'll discuss that too. Then the argument against that particular thing and the argument in favor of those things, and then we'll conclude this whole topic, right? So let us start with this topic. Now, why it particularly this news was recently you have seen or read somewhere, right? So Bihar government recently decided to use drones to monitor illegal alcohol manufacturing, right? So Bihar government recently decided to monitor the illegal alcohol manufacturing by use of drones, right? Now, this particular thing initiated debate of using physical and financial resources to implement provisions of Prohibition Act, right? So, this news initiated the debate of using these kind of resources like using of drones and all to implement the provisions of the Prohibition Act. Now, Prohibition Act itself here says because in Bihar you can't manufacture alcohol, you can't take alcohol and all, right? Because there is prohibition of alcohol in the state of Bihar. So that is why it after this news it initiated a debate of using these kind of resources for physical and financial resources like use of drone to implement such kind of act like Prohibition Act. In this case it is Alcohol Prohibition Act, right? So this was basically the idea behind the news itself, why this particular thing was in news. Now let us discuss the key points related with the news, right? What kind of, what provisions it attached, what articles of the constitution it attracted and all, what article it based on, right? We will discuss those things. So first, let's discuss Article 47 itself, right? Article 47 is a directive principle of state policy. First thing you need to understand this, Article 47 is a DPSP. It means, first thing, DPSP, if you refer to DPSP, it means that it can't be enforceable in any court of law, right? It is only suggestive in nature and you can't enforce DPSP in any court of law. Right. So Article 47 says the directive principle in the Constitution of India, that is, states that the state shall undertake rules to bring about prohibition of the consumption to except for medicinal purpose of intoxicating drinks and of drugs which are injurious to health. So Article 47, which is a DPSP, actually states that the state shall undertake rules to bring about prohibition of consumption except for medicinal purpose of intoxicated drinks and drugs which are injurious to health. So they are basically saying that they will prohibit the consumption of those kind of things except the medicinal purpose of those things, right? So you can use those kind of things, those intoxicants, for medicinal purpose but not for the consumption, right? You can't consume such kind of things except for the medicinal purpose. So this was all about Article 47, which is a DPSP, right? And it is related to the prohibition of alcohol and all. That is why I have discussed this thing. Then alcohol is a state subject in the state list under the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution. So that is why we can say that Gujarat have its own policy about the alcohol thing, Bihar has its own policy, Punjab has its own policy, right? So that is why this whole issue it comes because alcohol is a state subject. So every different state have their own perspective with regards to alcohol, even if they want to prohibit that or if they want to allow those kind of things. So that comes under the state list, and that will be implemented, and all those regulations will be provided by the state government itself, right? Then Prohibition Acts. Now again we'll talk about Prohibition Act, because again we are talking about prohibition of alcohol. We have talked about Article 47, right? So let's discuss about Prohibition Acts itself. First Prohibition Act which I want to discuss is Bombay Akbari Act 1878. So this was the act related to the state of Bombay. This act dealt with levying of duties on intoxicants among other things and aspects of prohibition via amendments made in 1939 and 47. Right. So this was the act of 1878. This act dealt with actually basically levying of duties on intoxicating drinks and all those things, but this was the first act. Then this act has faced so many amendments, like in 1939 and 47. Then second one is the Bombay Prohibition Act. Again it prohibits things. Then third one is important, which is Gujarat Prohibition Act 1949. Now Gujarat adopted the prohibition policy in 1960. Now again in Gujarat you can't, there is a prohibition of alcohol in that state. So Gujarat Prohibition Act, and then the Bihar Prohibition Act 2016, which leads to again the usage of alcohol and all. So prohibition of alcohol is there in Bihar too through the Bihar Prohibition Act 2016. So these are the prohibition acts basically in India. There are also some other acts, but I have discussed these things just for a basic understanding what Prohibition Act means and what are the prohibition acts. If you want to give an example, these are one such examples. Right. Now let's discuss the argument against and argument favor. Right. First let's discuss argument against. Now first argument against the prohibition of such kind of thing is right to privacy. Now first thing is that you can't prohibit such kind of thing. I have a right to use those things in my home and all. So there is a breach. The argument which goes against the use of such kind of thing, which goes against the prohibition of alcohol and all, is the right to privacy, right? Second one is the loss of revenue. How? Again, state comes under the state list, alcohol comes under the state list, right? And there are, see, if you manufacture, if you sell alcohol, you get a lot of revenue from those things also, right? In COVID, after the lockdown of the COVID, you have seen that Delhi government started selling alcohol, and people were following so much process for getting those things and all. So the revenue part is very important. So in Bihar, for example, we have prohibition of alcohol in our state. So this is the first thing that involves is the loss of revenue. State does not get any revenue from alcohol because you just prohibit such kind of thing, right? So loss of revenue is one such thing that this argument actually has some logical thing, that we have a loss in revenue if you don't allow usage of such kind of things. Then the source of employment, again source of employment is one such thing. If you manufacture alcohol and start selling those things, you need capital, you need human power, manpower. So that thing was a source of employment also. But in a state like Bihar, you have prohibited such kind of thing. In Gujarat, so again this sector is not in our state. So there must be loss of revenue, plus the source of employment is also not there, right? If you have such kind of sector in our state, then that sector will also provide employment to boost, right, to actually those youthful population. But as we don't have such sector in our state, so there's a loss of employment also. So loss of revenue plus loss of employment. Now, second is argument in favor. Now, what are arguments that are in favor of the usage of alcohol, right? Or the prohibition of alcohol. What are the arguments in favor of prohibition of alcohol? First is alcohol denudes family resources and reserves and leaves women and children at its most vulnerable victims. Right, so this was actually from data and from so many surveys. These things came that alcohol actually impact family in a very different way. Right, it impact the wealth of family also. A lot of money gets funded to the alcohol. Right, and there are so many people that just drank alcohol and do so many kind of things. That intoxicants is very basically very against, right? And this argument is also very logical, that it leaves women and children are basically the victims of these kind of things, right? And as so many report and surveys says that these with regard to alcohol, women and the children are the most vulnerable victims of these. Even CM Nitish Kumar, CM of Bihar, Nitish Kumar, also does the same thing to prohibit alcohol. They says that the women and children are the most serious victims of usage of alcohol. That is why we are prohibiting such kind of things in our state, right? Then they says that discourage regular consumption. Now prohibition leads to discourage regular consumption also. Basically, it does not lead to discourage regular consumption, but totally, right? You just prohibit such kind of usage in our state. So how will you derive basically benefit from these kind of industries? So you can't derive any kind of benefit from alcohol industry in the state where it is prohibited, right? But one thing is also there's a black marketing of such kind of things. Black marketing of alcohol is there in these states where it is completely prohibited, and through this, middlemen were getting so huge amount of money from these kind of things, right? So this is one such argument. Then, as the prohibition is mentioned in state list under Schedule 7, it is the duty of state to make provisions related to prohibition, right? So this is what we are also in saying, that if Bihar is using drones, is using financial and physical resources to actually prohibit illegal manufacturing of alcohol, then because they have the power to do so, because prohibition comes under the state list, so state has the power to do any such kind of things, right? And that is why they are doing these kind of things to prohibit the usage of illegal alcohol, right? So again, this prohibition, this argument is very logical, right? Now let us go with the suggestions or way forward. So first is drinking age should be made uniform across the country, and no person below that should be permitted to buy alcohol. Obviously, first suggestion we can first thing we can suggest is to make drinking age regular or uniform across the country. You just go to any state, drinking age should be uniform. This is the first suggestion. Second one is tough laws should be made against drunken behavior in public, domestic violence, under influence, and drinking and driving. Like I've said, women's and children's are the most vulnerable victims of these kind of things, of the usage of alcohol. So we must have a tough law which should be made against the drunken behavior in public, even in domestic violence under influence of alcohol, even drunk and drive cases. So second suggestion is to have a very tough and stringent law process, right? So that people are scared to do such kind of things, right? Then third suggestion is that the government should set aside part of revenue earned from alcohol for social education, de-addiction, and community support. Now the revenue part is also very important. So the government the government, the revenue that these governments are getting from the usage of alcohol, they should keep aside a part of their revenue to educate people, right? To socially educate people, to addict all these people, and the community support, right? So these are the suggestions that we are trying to state, right? So that's all about the topic. And if I summarize the whole topic, what you need to understand and what you need to remember, memorize for examination point of view is that first, which state says that, so it is important. Bihar government decided to use drones. Again, drones, Bihar state, for what purpose? Illegal alcohol manufacturing purpose. Then what it initiated, so Prohibition Act is a kind of thing, right? Then Article 47 is important because we are talking about prohibition of alcohol and intoxicants. So Article 47 is important. And if you are reading Article 47, you have to read DPSPs and features of DPSP. Like I've said, that they are not enforceable in a court of law, right? Then alcohol comes under which subject? So state subject, right? Then I have said prohibition, I've talked about Prohibition Act. This is not relevant for examination point of view, but just to have a basic understanding of what is Prohibition Act and all. Then argument against and argument in favor, and then the way forward, right? So that's all about this topic of drone monitoring, right? So thank you so much.